Spider-Man the Animated Series is one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic adaptation of Spider-Man in the animated realm. The animated series was my childhood, and it fills me with so much nostalgia every time I see it on screen. But did you know that this show actually had a sequel that feels like it was lost to time? That's right, I'm talking about Spider-Man Unlimited, and I hardly see anyone talk about this show or the series as a whole, and now I know why. Before you diehard Spider-Man fans start writing in the comments, I actually know that this is not a sequel to the animated series. I know, I just wanted to see who I could farm engagement with. But this show was actually created purely for the contractual obligations to continue airing episodes of the animated series. The plan at the time was to create a very low-budget Spider-Man show so that Fox Kids could keep the rights to the animated series and keep producing an unlimited amount of episodes. And this partly explains why the animated series has 65 episodes, which is almost unheard of for a kids' cartoon at the time. So then if Spider-Man Unlimited is technically a predecessor to the animated series, and the animated series is amazing, then why is Spider-Man Unlimited never talked about? Well, due to contractual obligations that dealt with the animated series and this small, low-budget indie film that was going to be coming out in 2002 called Spider-Man, the 1999 Unlimited series could not feature any typical Spider-Man characters. This show was unable to use any of the early comics or even the classic Spider-Man costume. The series would be able to use Spider-Man or Peter Parker, but none of his supporting characters or side stories. And then this ultimately resulted in the producers and writers wanting to create a 2099 Spider-Man show, but after Batman Beyond was such a huge success at the time, they feared that people would think that they were just copying their biggest competitor, DC. And even though Spider-Man 2099 and Miguel Harris is his own character, it's not that known to the public, so they thought that a lot of people wouldn't think this is an original character, but just a ripoff of Batman Beyond. This ultimately culminated in Spider-Man hitching a ride to Counter-Earth, and the original idea was that Spider-Man would find Uncle Ben on this Earth and want to stay here, but this idea was shortly shut down because of the Clone Saga mess. Executives thought that the idea of having a different Peter Parker and a different Uncle Ben on the same Earth is too close to the Clone Saga mess, so they scrapped that idea completely. The show then got greenlit into production without a core story being established, which resulted in a weird love child between Spider-Man the Animated Series, Spider-Man 2099, and Batman Beyond, which resulted in what I can only describe as a grunge, retro-futuristic-esque Spider-Man TV show. So if you're new to the channel, then you should know that I've been watching and ranking every Spider-Man animated TV show, and I've always seen the art style and the suit specifically for Spider-Man Unlimited, and I always wanted to watch it, but I never really got around to it. So when it was time to sit down and actually watch this show for the first time, I was ecstatic, and honestly I was pleasantly surprised after watching the first episode. I even put a little community post on my YouTube channel saying how much I really enjoyed the first episode, and I was really excited to see where the story goes from there. And a lot of you guys said you liked the show as well, and then some of you guys said it was mid, so I was really excited to see where this series was going to go. But sadly, to my disappointment, the first episode is by far the best episode in the series. The story follows the events of John Jameson Jr. exploring Counter-Earth, which is like a planet on the other side of the sun that's supposed to mimic our Earth. As Spider-Man witnesses Venom and Carnage teaming up for some reason to hitch a ride on JJ's shuttle, Spider-Man decides it's up to him to save JJ and go to Counter-Earth. So Peter creates one of my favorite Spider-Man suits of all time and convinces Nick Fury in this universe to let him take his shuttle to Counter-Earth and go save JJ. I like the in-universe explanation that since, Spider-Man's going to be in outer space, he needs a more, technologically advanced suit, so now he has this cool suit with the cape, and honestly, I love the design of this suit so much. I'm not a huge fan of the overall tech-based advanced Spider-Man suits, like the Iron Spider, unless it's for a specific event. But there's a good in-universe explanation for why he has this suit. He says that he's been working with Reed Richards for the past 6 months to create this nanotech suit, and I think it's a good in-universe explanation for why he needs to have this tech-based suit in outer space, so I'll let it slide. So going into this, I had no idea where this show was going to go narratively with the whole new Counter-Earth and stuff. I think this concept is very unique and different, but like I said in my review of Spider-Man the new animated series, just because something is different or unique doesn't mean that it's good. Once we get to Counter-Earth, we see that this world is ran by bestials, which are like an animal-human hybrid made by the High Evolutionary. If you saw Guardians of the Galaxy 3 last year, then just think of the planet with all the animal people on it, and that's basically what's going around on Counter-Earth. These animal hybrid bestials are the ruling class, and the humans are the poor homeless people that are the secondary class citizens that are living in the slums on Counter-Earth. And I really like this drastic contrast between Earth and Counter-Earth because it makes Counter-Earth feel like a whole new planet rather than just a new city. And that's one of my new gripes with new Star Wars projects, not to get off on a whole new tangent, but new planets just feel like new cities, but Counter-Earth feels like its own planet. At least it did for the first few episodes, but after that it felt like Counter-Earth was more just like a 2099 New York City with a lot of animal people. There wasn't a whole lot of world building, but we'll get to that at the end of the video. Once Spider-Man meets back up with JJ, he learns that there's a group of human resistance fighters who are trying to take back their planet from the bestials and the High Evolutionary. JJ tells Spider-Man that the High Evolutionary has their shuttles and that they can't go back to their own Earth without having to defeat the High Evolutionary and getting their shuttles back. This is a very simple plot, and honestly, I'm on board. We gotta get back to our Earth, number one. But we can't do that because we don't have our rocket ship, and we have to defeat the big bad guy in the series in order to get the rocket ship. Plain and simple, stakes are laid out right in front of us. Over the show's 13 episodes, Spider-Man teams up with the human resistance fighters to take down counter-Earth versions of like the Sentinels from X-Men, and in this Earth's version of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. He also meets brand new characters, including a mother and son named Nyoko and Shane, who he ends up living with in the meantime. And then there's a small subplot of him working for the Daily Bite, which is like the off-brand Daily Bugle, and then there's another mean like head news guy, which is like a blatant ripoff of J. Jonah Jameson. But sprinkled in between the main plot of the 13 episodes is the Venom and Carnage B plot of the show, where they're working together for some reason to turn all the bestials and humans into these symbiotes, and eventually take over the whole planet, but I'll talk more about that later. Now that I've done the groundwork and laid out the overall sense of the story and narrative, let's talk about the things that I liked about the show, and honestly, there's a lot. I touched upon this earlier, but I absolutely love this suit. Everything from the old comic style red and black colors, to the retro futuristic design of the suit, to the ripped web cape, which in all honesty provides zero practicality to the suit, but it looks so hard, it's so good, I love it. My only complaint is that I wish the suit had some sort of webbed wings, whether he could turn them on or off, but imagine the webbed wings with the webbed cape. That would be insane. That combo would go so hard. And here's some trivia for Spider-Man fans. The original design for Spider-Man's costume was black and red, but the artist had to shade in the black with blue so that the colors would pop properly out on the white pages. So eventually it was thought that Spider-Man's colors were blue and red when it was originally supposed to be black and red. So getting to see like my favorite aesthetic of like the futuristic cyberpunk aesthetic with the black and red original colors is so good. Everything in this show, from the art style to the cell shading, is phenomenal. I love it. Now I'm going to keep glazing the suit for a little bit because the sound design when Peter uses his web shooters is so cool. I love it.
I'm the pop.
It makes the suit really feel grounded in that Peter has to be cautious about each one of the webs he shoots. It feels like there's a direct purpose each time he uses a web. For like a lack of better term, they feel very gooey and sticky. And yeah, you might be thinking like, yeah, obviously Spider-Man's webs are gooey and sticky, but in other adaptations for some reasons, the webs in those shows really, they kind of just feel like ropes. I can't really describe it. Whereas in this show, each time Spider-Man shoots someone with his webs, it looks like he took a bottle of glue and just squirted it all over someone. Oh, and Spider-Man uses his web shooters to shoot out what I can only call are pellets. And each time he shoots it, coupled with like the sound design and the animation, it looks like he has dual A12s with the switch, just each time he's shooting it at somebody.
Yeah, you've seen one AA-12. Now you're going to get to see two AA-12s.
Now I just want to rapid fire a few more things that I think this show does great. Starting with like the music and sound design overall in this show is phenomenal. I absolutely adore it. Each voice actor also does an amazing job, especially the voice actor for Peter and Spider-Man. He also actually voice acts for the Green Goblin in this show and other video game adaptations that will come later on in the early 2000s. He voices Spider-Man and Peter in that as well. I love the relationship between Spider-Man and Shane. I just love when Spider-Man is like with little kids and is just a perfect role model in general to them. You can tell how much Shane looks up to both Peter and Spider-Man because he doesn't know they're the same person. Another thing, I feel like the human resistance fighters, each of them feel like their own different character, which is something I feel like we don't get a lot in different adaptations with side characters. They're kind of all just given like very surface level dialogue. So in this show, a lot of the side characters actually get their own episode dedicated to them, which I think is pretty cool. One episode that I really liked is we get a sad backstory of what happened to JJ when he lands on Counter-Earth. He gets experimented by the High Evolutionary and is now a werewolf. And it's a cool plot detail that I feel like a lot of Spider-Man adaptations don't get to explore. But to my headcanon and almost everything I know about the character, JJ normally is a werewolf. Just other Spider-Man adaptations don't ever get that far down into the story to have him be a werewolf. So it was good getting to see that here in season 1 of this show early on, even though it is on a Counter-Earth and he gets his powers for a different reason. Now, the last thing I really want to take time and applaud this show for is the art style. From everything to the animation, to the comic book text paneling, to the character designs, except for Venom and Carnage's character designs. Those are terrible, but I'll talk about that later. I absolutely love the cyberpunk city and each character and building having these like really bright, vibrant colors. I can't stress how much everything in this show looks so beautiful. It looks so good. This is some of the best Spider-Man art style I've ever seen. I'll always be a nostalgic fanboy for the animated series, but I've gotta admit, I think the art style and the color shading, specifically in this show, is leagues ahead of the animated series. I love Peter's character design. He looks more modern and less like geeky and nerdy than he has in past adaptations. And I know that's part of his character, but the Amazing Spider-Man movies kind of showed like he can still be a geeky looking guy, but he can also still be hot. So I like Peter's character design in this show. The High Evolutionary also has a really great character design. He's like a brooding force of nature with like this tarantula trench coat around him. I think he looks great. Honestly, all of the characters feel really unique and feel great. Even the weird, like, horny bestial lady, like, all the character designs, they just look so good. The next big standout for me in the show by far has to be, like, the text comic book paneling. I don't know if this has been done in other superhero TV shows before, but this is genius. It's such a small thing, but it gets the job done, and it helps the audience understand narratively where we're at. When I first saw this paneling, I felt like a little kid. I was so giddy and filled with joy. It's such a small thing, but I think it shows a clear direction and intention with the story and where we're going at, and I don't think a lot of other adaptations have ever done this. Obviously, this is a TV show about a comic book character, so making the TV show feel more like a comic book come to life seems like a no-brainer to me. I don't know why other adaptations don't ever do this. From all of the concept art that I've seen from Marvel's The Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which is this animated TV show that's coming out, I think in 2024 or 2025, and it's supposed to be like a non-canon prequel to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but from everything I've seen about like the art style to the character designs, it just looks like an older like retro comic book, and I'm super excited to see the direction that the show ends up taking, but the paneling seems like something that would fit right in with the art style of that show as well, so I hope that's something that gets transferred over to that show. As much as I like all the things in this show, there is a fair bit of things that I didn't like. So let's just get into my main gripes and negatives that I had with Spider-Man Unlimited. Now, if you've already seen this show, or you're just familiar and have seen videos or clips of this show, then you already know what I'm going to talk about first. And that's going to be the abominational character design of Carnage and Venom. Carnage specifically is this very skinny, grotesque, like bony symbiote. It's so gross and disgusting. The Venom design isn't as bad. I just don't know where they're going with like the horns and the bones that keep poking out of them. It doesn't make any sense. But multiple times throughout this series, Venom and Carnage like reduce down into this like goop version of themselves, which my main question when watching this was like, where are Cletus Cassidy and Eddie Brock at in that? It doesn't make sense that they're like constricting their bones and like slimming them down, and then they're almost like octopi in the sense that they can move and go in between holes in like panels and stuff. It's so weird. I hate it. They also speak in the singular instead of the plural. So like Venom normally speaks like we are Venom, talking about like Venom and Eddie. But in this, they both speak in the singular, saying like I want this, I want that, which it's unlike their characters, and it's just very confusing.
But it was over too soon. I can't wait till we spread more spores. What the hell are you? We are Venom.
I will say there's one episode specifically of Venom and Eddie getting separated. We get to see this version of the black suit Spider-Man, which I think is pretty cool. And we do get a good arc of Eddie basically dying and realizing that he has no control when the symbiote's over him, but he wants to live, so he's going to accept that the symbiote will come back onto him. Another thing I'm not a fan of with this show is I think there was a huge missed opportunity to not have Spider-Man fight all of his rogue galleries, because if you think about it, his rogue gallery is predominantly based on villains that have their theme based around like animals. So like the Green Goblin, that's a little different, but you have like Rhino, Scorpion, Doc Ock, Vulture. There's a whole lot of Spider-Man villains that are based off different animals. Yet all of those villains that I just mentioned are not in the show, which I think is a huge missed opportunity because we're dealing with like these animal bestial hybrids. We do see a version of Kraven, which is essentially just Kraven with a like ponytail. We do see Electro, which is, he looks like the guy, I think his name's Sid from Monsters Inc. He's like an electric eel. That's a terrible, disgusting design. We get a vulture design, which just kind of looks like a human dressed up like a vulture, which is really weird. So that one doesn't make any sense either. And then the Green Goblin design that we do see looks like this very like skinny, bony, kind of like the Carnage design version of like the Joker, and he's more of an anti-hero. I just think like the overall villains in this show were a huge missed opportunity. Speaking of missed opportunity, you really don't have to watch all of this show to get a full grasp of what it is. A large majority of the middle episodes in the show are just filler, and you don't need to watch it. Like, I'm not interested in seeing the plot, origin story, and backstory of Bandage Man that doesn't talk and is like wearing sandals the entire time. You don't need to watch that. It's not that important. Speaking of the filler plot, a lot of it wasn't complicated, it just never felt like it was going anywhere. I constantly found myself asking, like, what's next, what's going on, because like the main way a lot of superhero TV shows go is like you villain of the week, right? You have certain things you have to do to advance the plot of the story. But what it felt like constantly when watching this show is a good chunk of those middle episodes between like when Spider-Man arrives on Counter Earth to when like the big battle happens at the end of the series, a lot of the middle chunk of the series just felt like there wasn't a lot going on. Like there's going to be a very small problem, we're going to fight these Sentinels, and then we're going to move on. And I get I'm being critical of a show from 1999 based on Spider-Man, but it was kind of lame. It was not that interesting, and it was so disappointing getting to see what like this show actually was about, and this great concept of Spider-Man going to a Counter Earth with these bestials and the High Evolutionary. Like it had so much potential. I just did not enjoy myself watching the show. I feel like this could have been condensed down to like a 6-episode miniseries, and then have him get back to regular Earth and have some plot with Venom and Carnage being like more advanced symbiotes or something. I don't even know. I just don't think this show needed and really justified having 13 episodes on Counter Earth. I'd say it probably needed about 6. The plot was very weak and lackluster. The biggest sin this show commits is just being forgettable. When the show is good, it's great, but I think it just drug on too long. And the fact that the series ends just after 1 season and it's on a cliffhanger, which there's like this hive mind. Part of the B plot with Carnage and Venom is there's this hive mind on the planet that's like calling them as symbiotes, and so they're gonna try and like do some symbiote stuff, right, to make all the bestials and all the humans on the planet symbiotes. So that's the B plot of the series, and at the very end of the last episode, like in the finale, the bad guys aren't defeated. They kind of like go their separate ways because they break out Venom and Carnage, like Cletus Cassidy and Eddie Brock, because they got separated from their symbiotes, and they kind of reveal like, hey, we're screwed. There's this hive mind, and since Eddie Brock was separated from the symbiote once in the series, he made a failsafe that if he ever gets separated again, the hive mind's gonna like explode and have the symbiotes go all over the whole planet. So that's how the series ends. I'm not even kidding. I get that it was a season 1, and they obviously had plans, I would think, for a season 2, but season 2 never got made because Pokemon was it was such a big hit in the 90s. Like everyone knows about Pokemon, right? But because it was such a big hit, Marvel specifically kind of pulled all their comic book projects at the time and wanted to focus their efforts elsewhere. This also culminated with like the Spider-Man movie that came out in 2002. So the writers for the show, they had not written a season 2 yet. And if they did, there was not a lot planned out yet. So the fact that the show ended on a cliffhanger and one where everyone presumably dies, it's not a good look for the series. I know I said I had a whole lot to talk about this show that I wasn't a fan of, but I really don't now that I think about it, and it's just not as interesting as other adaptations of Spider-Man. Don't get me wrong, I love Spider-Man. I love a good Spider-Man TV show, and I will take a show like this, especially with the high highs that this show has, over the abomination that is the new animated series. So I do think this show is leagues above the animated series, or the new animated series, I should say. But the biggest gripe with this show is that it's very boring at times, and that's the worst thing a Spider-Man show could do in my mind. So yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about this show in terms of what I didn't like about it. I just think the overall plot of Spider-Man going to a different planet where he could fight different versions of his rogue gallery, and he has this new like Batman Beyond 2099-esque suit. I love that. I think that's awesome. You get him like a fish out of water story with like this character that everyone knows. There's so many different adaptations of him. It's like, what is he gonna do when he's not in New York City? But it's very lackluster, the way this show ended up being, and that's the worst part about this show. I just can't help but think that this show just had so much potential, and ultimately they just wasted it. There's not a lot that came from the show that I want to look back and be like, man, that was such a good episode, or a good plot, or a good series. The only thing I really like about this show is the animation style, how vibrant everything looks, and then the most beautiful suit that I've seen. Other than that, I just can't help but think of all the wasted potential. So I would recommend checking out the series if you haven't watched it. I would say start with the first episode, and if you like that, then keep watching it. And if it doesn't really interest you and you just want to see cool visuals, then throw it on in the background while like you're scrolling through TikTok or something, or you're watching some of my videos, or you're like making dinner, folding laundry, or just cleaning the house, or honestly doing whatever. Put it on in the background, and you catch a few awesome moments of the show, then you'll like it. But I don't think you need to sit down and watch all 13 episodes. A good chunk of the majority of the show is just filler and boring. But Plugging it into the tier list, I have to say, like, I'm going to give it a C tier. I think it's leagues better and above the new animated series, but I do not think it's better than the Ultimate Spider-Man. So I'm borderline between C and D tier, but because of the high highs of the show, I think I'm going to put it at C tier. Looking back at the overall show, it's sad to think about that we might not get such a unique adaptation of Spider-Man ever again. I mean, you think of the adaptations that have come since the 2002 Sam Raimi movie, they're all very like close and grounded to the traditional Spider-Man story. And yeah, there's comics that are different, and there's like Miguel, the 2099 and stuff, but speaking about Peter Parker specifically, every mainstream adaptation that Marvel has put out is very close to the grounded, like, generic story that we know Spider-Man to stay in. So I would love to see a continuation of this series in the future. I know X-Men 97 is getting revived soon, and way before Spider-Man Unlimited like revival, I want to see a Spider-Man animated series revival. So if this show ever does get a season 2, then I'll be here to watch it day one, but until then, you can check this out if you want to. If not, you're not missing any groundbreaking Peter Parker or Spider-Man stories. But if you stuck around this far, you might as well check it out on yourself. I mean, you're obviously a Spider-Man fan if you've watched this video till the end. But I really just want to say thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the channel. I absolutely love making these videos, and they're honestly such a great excuse to watch all the old Spider-Man cartoons that I never got the chance to. So thank you again for sticking around and supporting the channel. Let me know in the comments if you like the show, if you've never seen the show, if you think this is the worst show to ever exist. I just want to hear some feedback from you guys. But that's about all I have right now. Let me know what show you guys like me to review and watch in the future. Take care.